My name is Eleanor Mae Richardson, but most folks just call me Ellie. I'm 72 years old now, and I've been living right here in Magnolia Springs, Alabama, my whole blessed life. For 43 years, I worked as a seamstress and alteration specialist, mending clothes, creating beautiful wedding dresses, and fixing what was torn. Funny how I spent all that time mending fabric, but I couldn't mend what was broken in my own home. Today, I live quietly in my little cottage with my cat, Buttercup, and my memories. Some sweet, some bitter as black coffee on a cold morning. Quiet. Well, that's just a word, isn't it? Because after everything that happened, after discovering the truth about the man I shared my bed with for 42 years, it took a long time for any kind of peace to settle back into my heart. Lord have mercy. When you think you know someone like you know your own reflection, and then suddenly you discover you didn't know a single thing about who they really were. That's exactly what happened to me after 4 decades of marriage to the same man. I never thought I'd be telling this story to anyone, but maybe, just maybe, it can serve as a warning to whoever's listening out there right now. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something, dear heart. Where are you watching this from right now? What corner of this beautiful world are you in? Drop a comment and let this old lady know. It truly warms my soul to know who's listening to my story and what time of day you're hearing these words. Are you having your morning coffee? Your evening tea? Tell me, won't you? You spend your entire life building a history with someone, believing in them with every fiber of your being, trusting them with your eyes closed and your heart wide open. And sometimes, sometimes one small detail, one tiny decision changes absolutely everything in an instant. In my case, it was a doctor's appointment I decided to reschedule at the very last minute. If I had gone to that appointment as originally planned, maybe I would still be living in that comfortable illusion to this very day. But fate, or perhaps the good Lord above, wanted me to discover the truth, needed me to see what had been hidden right under my nose for years. It was February of 2019. I was 66 years old at the time. Thomas and I had been married for 42 years, a whole lifetime together, you understand? We'd raised 3 beautiful children, and we'd built our home on a piece of land his grandfather had left him. That particular month, I had a routine checkup scheduled with my doctor, Dr. Patterson, all the way over in Mobile. Thomas wasn't going to come with me because he said he had an important meeting at the hardware store he managed, something about inventory and new suppliers. It all sounded perfectly normal, perfectly reasonable. Nothing strange about it whatsoever. He'd even mentioned that he might use my absence to finally organize the garage, maybe donate some of my old sewing supplies that had been piling up for years. I'd been to appointments alone before many times. He'd stayed home. I'd never suspected a single thing, not once. The appointment was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I was planning to leave early, be gone most of the day. On Wednesday night, I laid out my good navy dress, set aside my medications, and prepared my purse. Thomas even made me a turkey sandwich to take along for the drive. He always worried about me getting hungry on the road. In the early morning hours around 5 o'clock, I woke up with the worst stomach cramps you can imagine. Must have been something I ate the night before. Thomas's experimental chili recipe, perhaps, bless his heart. I felt absolutely terrible, weak and dizzy. I called Dr. Patterson's office as soon as they opened at 8 and rescheduled for the following week. I told Thomas about the change, and you know what he said? "Oh, that's too bad, honey. You rest up. I still need to head to the store for that meeting, though." Will you be all right here alone? I assured him I'd be fine, that I'd just sleep it off. That's when I had an idea. Oh, what a foolish, innocent idea it seemed at the time. Instead of spending the day in bed feeling miserable, I thought I'd surprise him. Our marriage had felt a little distant lately, you see. That routine that comes with so many years together. That comfortable silence that sometimes feels less like peace and more like absence. I thought to myself, I'll pretend I'm still going to mobile. He'll head off to his meeting and I'll feel better by midday. Then I'll prepare his favorite dinner. Pot roast with all the fixings, fresh rolls, and that chocolate pecan pie he loves so much. I'll set the table with our good china, light some candles, put on that dress he always said made my eyes sparkle. What a sweet, silly idea for a 66-year-old woman, right? But at the time it seemed absolutely brilliant, romantic even. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have possibly imagined, was that this one simple decision would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I'd loved since I was 23 years old. It was the side of him I never expected, the one I couldn't even fathom existed in my wildest nightmares. Tell me something, dear ones, have you ever had a moment like that? A moment when one small choice changed everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories too. Sometimes you live your whole life right beside a person, sleeping in the same bed, eating at the same table, raising children together, and you think you know absolutely everything about them. But there are things, my dear listeners, that only God truly knows. There are secrets buried so deep that even 42 years of marriage can't bring them to light. Not until the right moment comes along, or maybe the wrong moment, depending on how you look at it. If you're finding something meaningful in my story, would you do this old lady a kindness? Please leave a like to bring some cheer to this 72-year-old heart of mine. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my other life stories. I've got plenty more to tell, believe me. And please tell me in the comments where you're watching this from and what time it is there right now. Are you in New York? California? Maybe somewhere across the ocean? It makes me so happy to know what corner of the world you're in, and what moment of your day you've chosen to spend with me. I was born right here in Magnolia Springs back in 1953, when everything was so different from how it is today. My father, Mr. James William Carter, owned a small general store on Main Street where he sold everything from flour and sugar to fabric and thread. There were 6 of us children, me, my brothers Daniel and Samuel, and my sisters Ruth, Patricia, and little Mary Beth. I was the 3rd oldest. Our house was modest, a white clapboard place with a wraparound porch and a swing that creaked in the summer breeze. We had a wood-burning stove that Mama kept going all winter long to fight off the Alabama cold. And yes, it does get cold here, despite what folks from up north might think. Life wasn't easy, but it was good, honest, and true. My mother, Mrs. Caroline Grace Carter, made the most incredible buttermilk biscuits and fried chicken you've ever tasted in your entire life. She also prepared those traditional Sunday suppers with black-eyed peas, collard greens, cornbread, and sweet tea so good it could make you cry. The biggest treat was when Daddy had a little extra money, and Mama would make her famous banana pudding with vanilla wafers and real whipped cream. Oh my goodness! We'd eat it while it was still slightly warm, sitting on that porch watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. I attended Magnolia Springs Elementary School, which was about 1.5 miles from our house. I walked there every single day with my siblings, rain or shine. When it stormed, we'd wrap ourselves in old raincoats that Mama had sewn from oilcloth, but even then we'd still arrive completely soaked. The teachers understood it was like that for everyone back then. They knew we were needed at home to help with chores, to mind the younger children, to assist at Daddy's store. It was around that time, I must have been about 10 years old in 1963, that I discovered what would become my life's calling. My mother took me to Miss Josephine Whitmore's dress shop in town. Miss Whitmore was an elegant, refined woman who had trained as a seamstress in Atlanta and had returned to Magnolia Springs to open her own business. We needed a dress altered for my sister Ruth's 8th grade graduation, and I was absolutely mesmerized watching that graceful woman work her magic, the way the fabric flowed through her hands, the precision of her stitches, the transformation of something plain into something beautiful. I looked up at my mother and said, "Mama, one day I'm going to sew just like Miss Josephine." And my mother, bless her heart, smiled down at me and said, "If that's what's in your heart, Eleanor Mae, then you'll have to work hard and pay attention." And work hard I did, let me tell you. When I turned 13 in 1966, I started working as an assistant to Miss Whitmore after school and on Saturdays. At first, I just swept the shop floor, organized spools of thread by color, and pressed finished garments with the heavy iron. But gradually, slowly, that patient woman taught me the craft. She didn't have any daughters of her own, only 2 sons who had no interest in sewing whatsoever, and I believe she saw in me someone to pass her precious knowledge on to. "Eleanor," she would say in her soft, cultured voice, "fabric is like people. It has personality, temperament, and memory. There are times when it's more forgiving, and times when it's stubborn and difficult. You have to learn to understand what each piece needs, to feel it with your fingers and your heart." I remember those words even now, decades later, as clearly as if she'd spoken them yesterday. During the annual Magnolia Springs Spring Festival, Miss Whitmore would always invite me to her home for Sunday dinner after church. The table would be covered with ham, sweet potato casserole, green bean almondine, fresh-baked rolls, and the most beautiful desserts you ever saw: coconut cake, lemon meringue pie, peach cobbler. Her husband, Mr. Gerald, treated me like I was their own daughter, always asking about my schooling, my dreams, my progress in the shop. In 1970, when I was 17 years old, we had a terrible hurricane that swept through our area. Hurricane Agnes, they called her, and she was fierce and merciless. The storm surge flooded half the town, and many people lost absolutely everything they owned. Our house, thankfully, was on slightly higher ground, so we were spared the worst. But Miss Whitmore's shop was completely destroyed. Water poured in, ruining bolts of fabric, damaging her precious sewing machines, destroying years of work and inventory. I spent 3 solid weeks helping her salvage what we could, cleaning, drying, repairing. So many beautiful things were lost forever. And I saw her cry for the first time, quiet tears that she tried to hide from me. But it was also during that difficult time that she told me something I'll never forget. "Eleanor Mae," she said, taking my hands in hers, "you're not my assistant anymore. You're my partner. You're family." That was one of the proudest, happiest days of my entire young life. By the time I turned 19 in 1972, I had learned nearly everything Miss Whitmore could teach me about sewing, alterations, and dressmaking. I started taking on my own clients, creating custom pieces, and people in the county began requesting me specifically. "I want the Carter girl to do my wedding dress," they'd say, or "Eleanor Mae did my daughter's prom gown." And it was absolutely perfect. That made Miss Whitmore so proud. Not jealous or resentful, but genuinely purely proud. "That's exactly how it should be, sweetheart," she'd tell me with tears of joy in her eyes. "The student surpasses the teacher. That's the natural order of things, and it's beautiful." It wasn't all work, of course not. On weekend evenings, we young folks would gather at the community center to dance to records, or we'd have fish fries down by the creek, or we'd attend the church socials where the ladies would compete to see who'd brought the best covered dish. I wasn't one of the wild, outgoing girls. I was always more reserved, more thoughtful. But I enjoyed being with my friends, sharing laughter and dreams, talking about boys and the future. In those days, without television in every home or all the modern distractions we have now, entertainment was simple but genuine and heartfelt. We made our own fun, and it meant something real. In 1973, when I was 20 years old, I experienced my first great heartbreak and loss. Miss Josephine Whitmore collapsed one afternoon while working on a particularly intricate wedding gown. She'd been complaining of feeling tired for weeks, but we'd all assumed it was just the long hours and the Alabama heat. Turned out to be a severe stroke. I was right there beside her when it happened, watching in horror as she crumpled to the floor, the delicate white fabric falling from her hands like snow. I screamed for help, called for an ambulance, held her hand and prayed. But by the time help arrived, she was already slipping away from us. I lost not just a mentor that day, but a second mother, a dear friend, a guiding light in my life. After the funeral, Mr. Gerald called me to their home and told me something that shocked me to my core. "Eleanor Mae," he said, his voice thick with grief, "Josephine wanted you to have the shop. It was her greatest wish to see you carry on her work, her legacy. I'd like to sell you her share of the business. You can pay me back in whatever way works for you whenever you're able. There's no rush, child." It was an enormous responsibility to take on at just 20 years old, owning and running a business all by myself. But I couldn't let Miss Whitmore's dream die with her. Couldn't let all she'd built simply disappear. And so I became the owner of what would become Eleanor Mae's Alterations and Custom Sewing. Still just a young woman with her whole life stretching out before her like an uncharted road. My father supported my decision wholeheartedly, even though it meant I wouldn't be helping at his store anymore. He could see I had found my calling, my purpose. "You follow your heart, Eleanor Mae," he told me, placing his weathered hand on my shoulder. "A woman's got to do what makes her soul sing. And I can see this work makes yours sing loud and clear. Now let me ask you something, dear friends watching this. Do you believe in following your heart? Even when it's difficult? Even when the path ahead is uncertain? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think about taking risks for your dreams. It was in 1975, when I was 22 years old, that I met Thomas Allen Richardson. He had come from Birmingham to Magnolia Springs to take over the management of Carter's hardware store. Yes, ironically, a store with my maiden name, though it belonged to no relation of mine. At that time, our little town was growing steadily. New families were settling in, and they needed someone experienced to run the expanding hardware business. Thomas came to manage and eventually buy the store from the retiring owner, Mr. Hutchinson. He was a handsome man. I'll give him that, tall and strong with dark brown hair, warm hazel eyes, and a smile that could light up a room like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. He had a way of speaking that made you feel like you were the only person in the world, like every word you said mattered deeply to him. I remember the very first time I saw him as clearly as if it happened this morning instead of nearly 50 years ago. He walked into my shop carrying a jacket that needed the zipper replaced. A brown leather jacket that had seen better days, but obviously meant something to him. "Are you the seamstress?" he asked, looking slightly surprised that I was so young. "Yes, sir, that's me, Eleanor Mae Carter," I answered, wiping my hands on my apron. "You don't have to call me sir," he said with that devastating smile. "I'm not that much older than you. Name's Thomas Richardson, but everyone calls me Tom." He laughed then, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to fill the entire shop. I repaired his jacket carefully, reinforcing the seams while I was at it, and when he came back to pick it up, he invited me to get coffee at Ruby's Cafe, which was right there on the corner of Main and Oak. It was the gathering place for everyone in Magnolia Springs. If you wanted to know what was happening in town, you went to Ruby's. They served the best coffee in 3 counties, along with the most incredible slice of pound cake, fresh biscuits with butter and jam, and Ruby's famous chicken salad sandwiches. I accepted his invitation, and that was the very first of many, many conversations we shared over steaming cups of coffee and slices of Ruby's lemon pound cake. Thomas was different from the boys I'd grown up with here in Magnolia Springs. He'd lived in the bigger city of Birmingham. He'd gone to business school. He'd seen more of the world than I had. He talked about expanding the hardware store, about modern business practices, about his dreams of making something substantial of his life. But he never, not once, made me feel small or uneducated for being a small-town seamstress. On the contrary, he seemed genuinely fascinated by my work, asking how I created patterns, how I chose fabrics for different projects, wanting to understand the artistry and precision involved in what I did. "You're creating beauty with your hands, Ellie," he told me one afternoon, watching me pin a hem. "That's a real gift, something special. Not everyone has that." We started courting that spring, and at first, honestly, it was complicated. His family back in Birmingham didn't particularly like the idea of their educated, business-minded son getting serious with a seamstress from a small town like Magnolia Springs. But Thomas was determined, persistent. "They'll come around eventually," he'd assure me, taking my hand in his. "They'll see what I see. A beautiful, talented, hard-working woman who's exactly what I want and need." And eventually, slowly, when they got to know me better, his family did soften their stance. They saw that even though I didn't have formal higher education, I was intelligent, capable, and genuinely devoted to their son. Our courtship lasted 3 wonderful years. Years of discovery, of dreaming together, of building something we both believed would last forever. We walked hand in hand through the town square, we attended barn dances and church picnics, we participated in all the traditional festivals like the 4th of July celebration with its fireworks over the creek, and the Christmas pageant where I helped make costumes and Thomas helped build sets. Everyone in Magnolia Springs knew we were a couple, knew we were serious about each other. In 1978, when I was 25 years old, Thomas asked me to marry him. He'd saved up for months to buy me a ring. A simple but beautiful gold band with a small diamond that caught the light like a captured star. He took me to Riverside Park, a lovely spot by Magnolia Creek where weeping willows draped their branches into the slow-moving water. It was autumn, and the leaves were painted in shades of gold and crimson. The air was crisp and clean, and the late afternoon sun cast everything in a warm golden glow. He got down on one knee right there by the water's edge and asked me to be his wife, to build a life with him, to grow old together. I cried tears of pure joy, threw my arms around him and said yes, yes with my whole heart. It was, without question, one of the happiest, most perfect moments of my entire existence. We were married in March of 1979. Me at 26 and him at 28. The ceremony took place at First Baptist Church of Magnolia Springs, the church where I'd been baptized as a child, where my parents had been married, where generations of my family had worshipped. It was a beautiful, simple ceremony filled with family and friends. Afterward, we had a reception at the community hall with barbecue, fried catfish, hush puppies, coleslaw, and all the traditional Southern foods we loved. A local bluegrass band played, and we danced until our feet ached and our faces hurt from smiling. Our honeymoon was spent in New Orleans, Louisiana, 3 magical days exploring the French Quarter, eating beignets at Café du Monde, listening to jazz music pouring out of every doorway, experiencing the vibrant culture and history. It was the farthest I'd ever been from home, and sharing it with Thomas made it feel like the most romantic adventure in the world. We started our married life together in a small rental house not far from my shop. It wasn't much to look at, just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, but it was ours, our little corner of the world. Thomas continued managing the hardware store, working longer and longer hours as the business grew. I kept sewing, building my client base, taking on more complex projects like wedding gowns and formal wear. Magnolia Springs was growing, new people were moving in, and there was always work to be done, always something that needed mending or creating. Life was busy, often exhausting, but it felt meaningful and full of purpose. In 1982, when I was 29 years old, we finally managed to save enough money to buy our first real piece of property. A beautiful lot on Magnolia Lane with mature oak trees dripping with Spanish moss and enough space to build the home we'd been dreaming about for years. We built slowly, carefully, adding on as we could afford it. First came the foundation and basic structure, then the interior finishing, then the details that would make it truly ours. Every single board of that house, every nail, every decision about paint colors and window placement we made together as partners, as a team. Thomas worked incredibly hard, sometimes taking on extra projects at the hardware store to earn additional money. I sewed late into the night, taking on rush orders, doing alterations for demanding clients, anything to add to our savings. It was a time of sacrifice and hard work, but also of profound unity and shared purpose. We had a common dream, to build a stable, beautiful life together, to eventually have children, to create something lasting and good with what the Lord had given us. At night, bone-tired after long days of work, we'd sit together on the unfinished porch, sipping sweet tea or coffee, looking up at the stars scattered across the Alabama sky like diamonds on black velvet, and we'd talk about our future. Thomas would tell me about his plans to eventually buy the hardware store outright, to modernize it, to make it the best in the region. I would share my dreams of maybe opening a second shop location, of teaching sewing classes to young girls the way Miss Whitmore had taught me. And so we lived, one day at a time, building our life brick by brick, stitch by stitch, believing absolutely that we were creating something beautiful and permanent together. What about you, dear ones? Have you ever worked incredibly hard for a dream with someone you loved? Have you built something from nothing with your own 2 hands? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Your stories matter to me, they truly do. In 1984, when I was 31 years old, I received the most wonderful news. I was pregnant with our first child. We had been trying for a few years, hoping and praying, and when Dr. Patterson confirmed it, Thomas and I both cried tears of absolute joy and gratitude. It felt like all the pieces of our life were finally falling perfectly into place. The house was nearly finished, both our businesses were thriving, and now we were going to become parents. I continued sewing until my 7th month, when bending over the machine became too uncomfortable. Then I took a brief leave to prepare for the baby. We transformed the smallest bedroom into a nursery, painting it a soft yellow since we didn't know whether we were having a boy or a girl. Thomas built a beautiful wooden cradle with his own hands, sanding it smooth as silk so there wouldn't be even the tiniest splinter. I sewed curtains, baby blankets, and tiny gowns, pouring all my love and anticipation into every stitch. Our first child, Rebecca Lynn, was born in April of 1985, when I was 32 years old. She was perfect, absolutely perfect, with rosy cheeks, a cap of dark hair, and the tiniest, most delicate fingers I'd ever seen. I remember hearing her first cry in that delivery room, and feeling like my heart might actually burst from the overwhelming love that flooded through me. "You did it, Ellie," Thomas whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held our daughter for the first time. "You gave us the most beautiful gift in the world." Life transformed completely with Rebecca's arrival, as it does for every new parent. I took several months away from the shop to care for her, to learn the rhythms of motherhood, to navigate the sleepless nights and the incredible joy of watching this tiny person discover the world. Thomas was wonderful with her, coming home from long days at the hardware store and immediately reaching for Rebecca, walking her around the house, singing silly songs, making funny faces to coax out her smiles. I'd watch them together, my husband and my daughter, and think to myself, this is it. This is everything I ever wanted. This is happiness. 3 years later, in 1988, when I was 35, our family grew again. I became pregnant with our second child, and this time the pregnancy was easier. I knew what to expect, felt more confident and prepared. Rebecca, at 3 years old, was fascinated by my growing belly, always wanting to touch it, to talk to her future sibling to help me prepare. "You're going to be a big sister," Thomas would tell her, lifting her up so she could kiss my stomach. "That's a very important job, Rebecca Lynn. You'll have to help Mama and Daddy take care of the baby. Teach them everything you know." And she took that responsibility very seriously, as only a 3-year-old can, already practicing being gentle with her baby dolls, already preparing to be the best big sister in the world. In January of 1989, our son Michael James was born. If Rebecca was Thomas's mirror image, Michael was completely mine. He had my coloring, my features, my temperament even from those earliest days. He was a quieter baby than Rebecca had been, more observant, more content to simply watch the world around him with those enormous, thoughtful eyes. Our home, which had once seemed so spacious, now felt wonderfully, chaotically full with 2 small children. Toys scattered across every surface, laughter echoing through the rooms, the constant motion and energy of family life. It was exhausting, demanding, sometimes overwhelming, but it was also the most beautiful mess imaginable. The 1980s and 90s were years of stability, of building, of what I believed was profound happiness for all of us. Thomas's hardware store was thriving beyond our wildest expectations. He'd purchased it outright from Mr. Hutchinson in 1986, renamed it Richardson's Hardware and Supply, and it had become the go-to place for everyone in the county who needed tools, supplies, gardening equipment, or expert advice. He expanded the inventory, hired additional staff, and the business grew year after year. My sewing shop continued to flourish as well. I'd gone back to work when Michael turned 2, finding a wonderful woman named Mrs. Dorothy Jenkins who looked after the children while Thomas and I were working. Eleanor Mae's alterations had developed a reputation throughout the region for quality work, attention to detail, and fair prices. I specialized in wedding gowns and formal wear, but I still did everyday alterations too. Hemming pants, replacing zippers, mending tiers, breathing new life into worn garments. It was simple work in many ways, but it was honest work, necessary work, and it brought in steady income that helped us save for the children's future. Life had a rhythm to it, a comfortable pattern. We worked during the week, attended church on Sundays, hosted family dinners where my siblings and their children would come over, and the house would be bursting with noise and love. Thomas would grill steaks or chicken in the backyard on a brick barbecue pit he built himself, while I prepared sides, potato salad, corn on the cob, fresh sliced tomatoes from our garden, biscuits, and always a homemade dessert. The children would play in the yard until the fireflies came out and we'd call them in for baths and bedtime stories. We continued the traditions I'd grown up with, the ones that mattered, the ones that connected us to our community and our heritage. We were active in our church. Thomas served on the deacon board. I taught Sunday school to the little ones and helped with the annual Christmas pageant, sewing costumes and organizing the chaos backstage. In 1997, when I was 44 years old, we experienced a significant challenge that tested us but ultimately, I believed at the time, brought us closer together. A major storm system moved through Alabama, spawning tornadoes and causing severe flooding throughout our region. Our house, thankfully, was spared any major damage, but my shop was not so fortunate. The roof sustained significant damage, water poured in, ruining fabric inventory, damaging machines, destroying customer orders that were in progress. It was devastating, heartbreaking to see years of work and investment damaged in a matter of hours. But what I remember most about that difficult time was how Thomas stepped up, how he was there for me completely. He helped with the cleanup, he handled the insurance claims, he hired contractors to make repairs. He reassured me that we would rebuild and it would be even better than before. "We're a team, Ellie," he told me, holding me while I cried over ruined fabric and damaged machines. "We've weathered storms before, and we'll weather this one too. Your shop will be back and running in no time, I promise you that." And he was right. Within 2 months, Eleanor Mae's alterations was not just repaired but improved. New machines, better lighting, expanded workspace, updated inventory. That experience, I thought, proved the strength of our marriage, the depth of our partnership. Looking back now, with the clarity that hindsight brings, I wonder if perhaps he was already living his double life even then, if the guilt of his secrets made him work extra hard to appear devoted and supportive. But at the time, I had no reason to doubt him, no reason to question anything. I simply felt grateful to have such a supportive, loving husband by my side. Time continued its steady march forward, as it always does, whether we're ready or not. Our children grew and changed year by year. Rebecca finished high school in 2003 when I was 50, and she decided she wanted to study fashion design at the Art Institute in Atlanta. "Mama," she told me, her eyes shining with dreams and ambition, "I want to create beautiful things like you do, but on a bigger scale. I want to see my designs on runways, in magazines, in stores across the country." I was so proud of her, so thrilled that she'd found her passion and was brave enough to pursue it. Thomas, though, seemed less enthusiastic. "Atlanta's expensive," he said, frowning at the tuition information. Maybe she could study something more practical closer to home. But I insisted we would find a way, we would make it work, because our daughter deserved the chance to chase her dreams the way I'd been able to chase mine. Michael was still in high school at that point, a quiet, studious boy who loved mathematics and science, who spent his free time reading and tinkering with electronics in the garage. He was Thomas's companion, his shadow, always wanting to help at the hardware store, learning about tools and supplies and business management. In 2004, when I was 51, we celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary with a beautiful vow renewal ceremony at our church. It was Rebecca's idea. She'd come home from Atlanta for the summer and suggested it as a way to celebrate a quarter-century of marriage. We renewed our vows in front of family and friends, and I wore a dress I'd sewn myself. Ivory lace with delicate beading, elegant and age-appropriate. Thomas looked handsome in his dark suit, and when he took my hands and repeated those sacred promises, I believed every single word with my whole heart. For better or worse, in sickness and health, forsaking all others as long as we both shall live. The words echoed through that sanctuary, and I had no reason, not even the smallest doubt, to question their truth. How could I have known that forsaking all others had become meaningless to him years before? How could I have possibly suspected that the man looking into my eyes and speaking those vows had already broken them repeatedly? Let me ask you something, dear hearts. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover later that your trust was misplaced? How did you handle that betrayal? I want to hear your thoughts, your experiences. Please share in the comments. Knowing I'm not alone in this helps more than you can imagine. Life continued normally through the mid-2000s. Michael graduated high school in 2007 and decided to attend Auburn University to study business administration, planning to eventually take over the hardware store from his father. Both our children were launched into their own lives, pursuing their own dreams, and Thomas and I entered that next phase of life, the empty nest years that people talk about. Some couples struggle when the children leave, suddenly finding themselves strangers who'd been so focused on parenting that they'd forgotten to be partners. But that wasn't us, or so I believed. We seemed to grow even closer during those years. We had more time for each other, more freedom to travel, to enjoy dinners out, to simply be together without the constant demands of active parenting. We took weekend trips to the coast, we explored state parks, we attended festivals and concerts. Thomas seemed more attentive than ever, bringing me flowers for no special reason, suggesting spontaneous dates, complimenting me more frequently. "You look beautiful tonight, Ellie," he'd say, and I'd blush like a young bride, delighted that after so many years together, he still saw me that way, still found me attractive and desirable. Now, with the bitter wisdom of hindsight, I understand what was actually happening. The flowers, the attention, the compliments, they were guilt gifts, attempts to assuage his conscience for the double life he was living. But at the time, I interpreted them as signs of a marriage that was thriving, growing stronger in our later years rather than fading away. In 2010, when I was 57, Rebecca graduated from the Art Institute and got her first real job with a fashion company in Atlanta. We attended her graduation ceremony, bursting with pride as she walked across that stage to receive her degree. She looked so grown up, so confident and professional, so completely different from the little girl who used to play with fabric scraps in my shop. That same year, Michael met a young woman named Jennifer at Auburn, a sweet girl from Montgomery studying elementary education. They started dating seriously, and we could all see it was heading somewhere permanent. In 2012, they got married in a lovely ceremony right here in Magnolia Springs. I sewed Jennifer's wedding dress myself. Ivory silk with delicate lace applique, a fitted bodice and a flowing train. It was one of the most meaningful projects I'd ever completed, creating something so special for my son's bride, welcoming her into our family with every careful stitch. Thomas seemed emotional during the wedding, wiping away tears as Michael and Jennifer exchanged their vows. "Our baby boy is all grown up," he whispered to me, squeezing my hand. I leaned into him, feeling grateful for this man who'd been my partner in raising these beautiful children, who'd helped me build this life, this family. How could I have known that even then, even in that sacred moment, he was living a lie? The years that followed brought new joys, grandchildren. Jennifer gave birth to our first grandchild, Emma Grace, in 2013 when I was 60 years old. Then came little Jacob Thomas in 2015. Being a grandmother was everything people had told me it would be and more. The pure delight without the exhausting responsibility. The joy of watching these tiny humans discover the world. The pleasure of spoiling them and then sending them home to their parents. I made quilts for each of them, carefully piecing together fabrics in cheerful patterns, each stitch infused with love and prayers for their futures. Thomas seemed to adore the grandchildren too, always ready to read them stories, to play endless games of peekaboo, to build elaborate block towers just so they could knock them down with squeals of laughter. "Granddaddy's favorite people," he'd say, bouncing Emma on his knee while Jacob toddled around his feet. Rebecca, meanwhile, had become quite successful in Atlanta. By 2016, she'd been promoted to senior designer at her company, and her creations were appearing in fashion magazines and high-end boutiques. She was dating a photographer named Marcus, and though they weren't in any hurry to marry, they seemed happy together, building a life in the city. Our family felt complete, blessed, exactly as it should be. But it was around this time, 2016 and 2017, when I was 63 and 64 years old, that I began noticing small changes in Thomas. Nothing dramatic or obvious, just subtle shifts that caught my attention like loose threads that need to be pulled. He started working later hours at the hardware store. "We're doing inventory," he'd explain, or "I'm meeting with a new supplier," or "there's paperwork that needs attention." It all sounded perfectly reasonable, perfectly legitimate. He'd always been a dedicated businessman, so longer hours didn't immediately raise red flags. But then I noticed he'd gotten a new cell phone. A smartphone, which was unusual because Thomas had always resisted technology, had always said his old flip phone worked just fine for his needs. "The store needs me to have email access on the go," he explained when I asked about it. "It's just more efficient for business, Ellie. Can't avoid progress forever." He became protective of that phone in ways that seemed odd. He'd take it with him everywhere, to the bathroom, out to the garage on his evening walks. If it rang while he was in another room, he'd practically run to answer it before I could see who was calling. When I'd casually ask, "Who was that?" he'd always have an explanation ready: supplier, employee, customer, always something work-related. I also noticed he started paying more attention to his appearance. Now, Thomas had always been a neat, presentable man, but suddenly he was buying new clothes more frequently, wearing cologne he'd never worn before, going to the barber more often for haircuts and beard trims, just trying to keep up professional appearances. He'd say when I complimented him, "The store's doing well. I need to look the part of a successful businessman." In early 2017, Thomas told me he'd be attending a hardware industry conference in Montgomery. It was a 3-day event, Wednesday through Friday, where store owners and managers from across the state would network, learn about new products, and attend seminars. "It's important for staying competitive," he explained, showing me the conference brochure. I haven't been to one of these in years, but Jim Bartlett from the Suppliers Association really encouraged me to attend. It seemed completely legitimate. The brochure looked official, the conference was real, everything checked out. "That sounds wonderful, honey," I told him. "It'll be good for you to network with other business owners, maybe get some fresh ideas for the store." He seemed almost relieved by my easy acceptance, by my complete lack of suspicion. He left on Wednesday morning, kissing me goodbye at the door, his overnight bag packed with neat clothes I'd ironed for him the night before. "I'll call you each evening," he promised. "Love you, Ellie." And he did call Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, telling me about the seminars he'd attended, the people he'd met, the new product lines he was learning about. Everything seemed perfectly normal, perfectly innocent. But after he returned, I noticed something strange. I was doing laundry, emptying his suitcase, when I found a restaurant receipt tucked in the side pocket. It was from a place called La Bella Luna, an upscale Italian restaurant in Montgomery. The receipt showed dinner for two with wine, appetizers, entrees, dessert, an expensive romantic meal. The date was Thursday evening during the conference. When I asked him about it casually, just curious conversation, he explained immediately. "Oh, that. Jim Bartlett and I went there to discuss a potential partnership deal. The conference food was terrible cafeteria stuff, so we decided to have a proper business dinner." It made sense. Business dinners happen. I had no reason to doubt him, but something about it stayed with me, like a small stone in my shoe that you can't quite shake out. Why would a business dinner include wine and dessert at such a romantic restaurant? Why hadn't he mentioned this important meeting with Jim Bartlett before? But I pushed the thoughts away, scolded myself for being suspicious and paranoid. This was Thomas, my husband of nearly 40 years, my partner, my friend. Of course, there was a reasonable explanation. The conferences became more frequent after that. Every few months there was another one in Birmingham, in Huntsville, in Mobile. Each time Thomas would show me the official information, everything looked legitimate, and each time he'd return with stories about what he'd learned, who he'd met, how it would benefit the store. And each time I believed him completely. What are you thinking right now, dear ones? Are you seeing the signs I missed? Are you wondering how I could have been so blind? Tell me honestly in the comments. Have you ever missed red flags because you trusted someone so completely? I want to know I'm not the only one who loved too much, who trusted too deeply. In 2018, when I was 65 years old, I decided to retire from active sewing work. My eyes weren't as sharp as they used to be. My fingers sometimes ached with arthritis, and after 4 decades of creating and mending, I felt ready to slow down, to enjoy life at a gentler pace. I didn't close the shop entirely. I kept it open for simple alterations and referred complex projects to younger seamstresses I'd mentored over the years. Thomas seemed pleased about my retirement. "You've earned it, Ellie," he said, hugging me close. "Now we can travel more, spend more time together. Really enjoy these golden years." And we did travel some. A cruise to the Caribbean, a road trip through the Smoky Mountains, visits to see Rebecca in Atlanta and Michael's family here in town. But I also noticed that Thomas's conferences and business trips seemed to increase rather than decrease. "I thought with me retired we'd be doing more together," I mentioned once, trying to keep my tone light and not accusatory. "I know, honey, and we will," he assured me. "But right now the store is at a crucial expansion phase. Once we get through this growth period, I'll cut back on travel, I promise." I accepted that explanation because what else could I do? Question him? Demand proof? Accuse him of lying without any real evidence? That wasn't the kind of marriage we had. We'd always operated on trust, on mutual respect, on the belief that we were partners who told each other the truth. It was in late 2018 that I started noticing even more changes. Thomas became more secretive about his phone, setting up a password lock, tilting the screen away when I was nearby, sometimes stepping outside to take calls even in cold or rainy weather. Client confidentiality, he'd explain if I questioned it. Some people are purchasing supplies for surprise projects or dealing with financial situations they don't want overheard. I have to respect their privacy. Again, it sounded reasonable. I had no concrete reason to doubt him, but doubt had begun growing anyway, like a seed planted deep that slowly, inevitably pushes toward the light no matter how much you try to bury it. I also noticed that our intimate life, which had naturally slowed with age but had remained affectionate and present, had diminished almost entirely. Weeks would pass without any physical closeness beyond a quick kiss goodbye or a brief hug. When I tried to initiate intimacy, Thomas always had an excuse. He was tired from work, his back was bothering him, he had an early morning and needed sleep. "Is everything okay between us?" I asked him one night as we lay in bed, far apart, the space between us feeling like an ocean. "Of course, Ellie," he said, sounding almost annoyed by the question. "We're just getting older, that's all. This is normal at our age. Don't make problems where there aren't any." So I didn't. I pushed down the concerns, the intuition, the small voice that kept whispering that something was wrong. I told myself I was being insecure, paranoid, foolish. We'd been married nearly 40 years. Surely I was imagining things, creating drama where none existed. In February of 2019, Thomas announced another conference, this one in Mobile, running Thursday through Saturday. By this point, I'd stopped even questioning them. "Have a good trip," I said automatically, helping him pack his bag, making sure he had everything he needed. But this time fate intervened. Or perhaps the Lord decided it was time for me to stop living in denial and face the truth, no matter how painful it would be. I had that doctor's appointment scheduled for Thursday, routine blood work and checkup with Dr. Patterson in Mobile. The appointment had been on the calendar for weeks. Thursday morning, I woke up with those terrible stomach cramps, feeling absolutely awful. I called and rescheduled for the following week, then told Thomas, who'd already left for his conference, that I wouldn't be making the trip to Mobile after all. As I lay there feeling miserable, I had that idea, that foolish, innocent idea that would change everything. Instead of spending the day sick in bed, I'd surprise Thomas. I'd feel better by afternoon, drive to Mobile, find out which hotel the conference was at, and show up to take him to a romantic dinner. We could spend the evening together, maybe even stay overnight, rekindle some of that closeness that seemed to have faded. It seemed like such a sweet, loving gesture. A wife surprising her hard-working husband, trying to add some romance and spontaneity to their marriage. How could I have known that this simple decision would shatter my entire world into pieces I'd never be able to put back together quite the same way? By noon, my stomach had settled. I showered, dressed in a nice outfit, a blue blouse Thomas had always liked and my good slacks. I did my hair and makeup carefully, wanting to look pretty for him, wanting him to see me and remember why he'd fallen in love with me all those years ago. I packed an overnight bag just in case, feeling almost giddy with the spontaneity of it all. During that drive, I felt happy, excited, like a young woman heading off on an adventure, rather than a 66-year-old grandmother with arthritis and reading glasses. I called the conference center, the Grand Mobile Convention Center, according to the brochure Thomas had shown me, to ask which hotel most of the attendees were staying at. "Ma'am, I'm sorry," the confused receptionist said, "but we don't have any hardware industry conference scheduled this week. Are you sure you have the right venue?" My heart skipped a beat. "Let me check," I said, my voice suddenly unsteady. "It's the Alabama Hardware Retailers Conference, February 21st through 23rd. There was a pause, then, "Ma'am, we have nothing like that on our schedule for this entire month. Perhaps it's at a different location." I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling slightly. There had to be a simple explanation. Maybe I'd misunderstood which convention center it was at. Maybe Thomas had said a different venue and I'd gotten confused. I called the 3 other conference centers in Mobile. None of them had any hardware industry conference that week. None of them had anything matching what Thomas had described. The sick feeling in my stomach returned, but this time it had nothing to do with bad chili and everything to do with the growing certainty that something was very, very wrong. Where was my husband? If he wasn't at a conference, where had he been going all these times? What had he been doing? I sat in my car in a parking lot, trying to decide what to do next. I could call him, confront him directly, demand to know where he really was. But something stopped me, the need to know the full truth, to understand the complete picture before giving him a chance to explain it away with more lies. I started driving to hotels, the nicer ones first, the kinds of places someone might stay for a romantic getaway rather than a business conference. At the 4th hotel I tried, the Magnolia Bay Resort, an upscale place overlooking the water, I hit pay dirt, though I desperately wished I hadn't. "Yes, ma'am," the front desk clerk said when I showed her a photo of Thomas on my phone. "Mr. Richardson checked in yesterday. He's one of our regular guests. Stays with us several times a year." Regular guest? Several times a year? My head was spinning. "Is he registered under Thomas Richardson?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She checked her computer, then looked uncomfortable. "Actually, the reservation is under a different name, but I recognize him from your photo. He's in room 317. She paused, then added quietly, Ma'am, he checked in with a female guest. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but you look like you need to know. I'm sorry. The world tilted sideways. Everything went gray at the edges. A female guest. Regular guest. Room 317. The words echoed in my head but didn't quite make sense, like a language I'd never learned. Thank you, I managed to say, though I'm not sure how I formed the words. I walked away from the desk on legs that didn't feel quite solid, like I was walking on foam rather than marble tile. I found a bench in the lobby and sat down heavily, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to understand what I just learned. Thomas, my husband of 40 years, my partner, my friend, was here in this hotel with another woman. Not at a conference. Not working. Here with someone else doing God knows what, living God knows what kind of life, while I sat at home trusting him completely, never questioning, never suspecting. How long had this been going on? Who was she? Did he love her? Was this just physical, or was it something deeper? The questions poured through my mind like water through a broken dam. Too many and too fast to process individually. I don't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes? 30? An hour? Time seemed to have lost all meaning. Finally, I stood up on shaking legs and walked to the elevator. I pressed 3, watched the numbers light up as I ascended, each floor taking me closer to a truth I simultaneously needed and dreaded. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, elegant. Room 317 was at the end, near the window overlooking the bay. I walked toward it like I was walking through water, everything moving in slow motion, every step an enormous effort. I raised my hand to knock, then paused. What would I find on the other side of this door? What would I say? What would he say? Before I could knock, the door opened. A woman stepped out. Younger than me, maybe in her mid-50s, attractive in a polished way with highlighted blonde hair and expensive clothes. She froze when she saw me standing there, her eyes widening in shock and recognition, though we'd never met. "Oh God," she whispered. "You're his wife, aren't you?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I just stared at her, this stranger who somehow knew who I was, who was stepping out of a hotel room where my husband was staying. Behind her, I heard Thomas's voice. "Diane, did you forget your—" He appeared in the doorway and stopped dead when he saw me. The color drained from his face. "Ellie," he said, my name coming out like a strangled sound. "What are you? How did you—" "There's no conference," I finally managed to say, my voice surprisingly calm despite the fact that my entire world was crumbling. "There never was a conference, was there, Thomas?" The woman, Diane, looked between us, clearly deciding she wanted no part of this confrontation. "I should go," she said quietly, squeezing past me and practically running toward the elevator. "Wait," Thomas called after her, but she didn't stop. He turned back to me, his face a mixture of panic and something that looked almost like relief. "Ellie, please let me explain. Come inside. We can't talk about this in the hallway." What could I do? I stepped into the room, and he closed the door behind us. The room was expensive, beautiful, with a king-sized bed that had clearly been slept in, 2 glasses of wine on the nightstand, a woman's overnight bag open on the luggage rack. Evidence of intimacy, of a life I knew nothing about, everywhere I looked. "How long?" I asked, still in that strange, calm voice that didn't sound like my own. "How long has this been going on, Thomas?" He sat down on the edge of the bed, put his head in his hands. 3 years, he said finally. "I met Diane 3 years ago. 3 years. While I'd been retiring from my shop, spending time with our grandchildren, planning our future together, he'd been building a completely separate life with someone else. And the conferences? I asked. Were any of them real? He shook his head. Some were real in the beginning, but for the last 2 years they've mostly been excuses to see Diane. She lives in Birmingham, works as a real estate agent. We'd meet in different cities: Mobile, Montgomery, Huntsville. Somewhere neither of us would be recognized. Who else knows? I asked. Do our children know? Your employees? Our friends? No one knows, he said quickly. Ellie, I swear, this has been completely separate from our real life. You, the kids, our home, our family, that's my real life. This thing with Diane, it's just what? I interrupted, anger finally breaking through the shock. Just a hobby? Just something you do for fun on the side? Just a betrayal of every promise you ever made to me. He looked up at me then, and I saw tears in his eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I love you, Ellie. You have to believe that. You love me. I repeated, my voice rising now. You love me, but you've been sleeping with another woman for 3 years? You love me, but you've lied to my face over and over? You love me, but you've made a fool of me, made me trust you while you were living this double life. It's complicated, he said weakly. No, Thomas, I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. It's actually very simple. You made a choice. Many choices, actually. Every time you called Diane, every time you met her in a hotel, every time you lied to me about where you were, those were choices. Don't you dare tell me this is complicated. I needed to know more, needed to understand the full scope of his betrayal. Does she know about me? Does she know you're married? He nodded miserably. Yes, she knows. She's divorced herself, has been for 10 years. She said she was okay with the situation, that she didn't need or want marriage, just companionship. How convenient for both of you, I said bitterly. And what exactly did you tell her about me? About our marriage? I told her the truth, he said. That we've been married for decades, that we have children and grandchildren, that I wasn't planning to leave you. She understood. She said she just wanted whatever part of me I could give her. The truth. He told her the truth while lying to me. The irony was almost funny, except nothing about this situation was remotely amusing. Were there others? I asked, suddenly needing to know the full extent of it. Before Diane, were there other women? He hesitated too long before answering, and I knew. Oh my God, I whispered. There were others. How many, Thomas? How many years have you been doing this? Ellie, please. How many? I demanded. 2 before Diane, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Both brief, nothing serious. The first was about 15 years ago when Rebecca was in college. It lasted a few months. Then another one about 8 years ago, maybe 6 months. But Diane is different. This has been longer, more consistent. 15 years. He'd been cheating on me for 15 years. More than a third of our marriage had been built on lies. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in. I need to leave, I said, turning toward the door. Ellie, wait, please, he said, jumping up and reaching for my arm. Don't touch me. I snapped, jerking away from him. Don't you ever touch me again. Where are you going? What are you going to do? He asked, panic clear in his voice now. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I can't be here. I can't look at you right now. I walked out of that hotel room, down the hallway, into the elevator, through the lobby and out to my car. Only when I was safely locked inside did I finally break down, sobbing so hard I could barely catch my breath, my entire body shaking with the force of it. Everything I'd believed about my life, my marriage, my husband, it was all a lie. Or not all a lie perhaps, but so thoroughly mixed with deception that I couldn't tell anymore what had been real and what had been performance. Had he ever truly loved me? Or had I just been convenient, the respectable wife who gave him social standing and legitimacy while he pursued excitement elsewhere? I don't remember driving home. I must have, obviously, because I ended up back in Magnolia Springs, but I have absolutely no memory of that hour-and-a-half journey. The next thing I clearly remember is sitting in my car in our driveway, looking at the house we'd built together, wondering how I could possibly go inside, how I could sleep in that bed, how I could continue living in a space so saturated with lies. Tell me, dear friends watching this, have any of you experienced betrayal like this? That moment when everything you thought was solid turns out to be built on sand? How did you survive it? Please share your stories in the comments. Knowing I'm not alone in this pain helps more than you could possibly know. I couldn't stay in that house, not that night. I drove to Rebecca's apartment in Atlanta, 3 hours away. But I needed my daughter, needed someone who loved me unconditionally. I called her from the car, told her I was coming, told her something had happened but I'd explain when I got there. She was waiting outside her building when I arrived, and the moment I saw her face, so full of concern and love, I broke down again. She held me right there on the sidewalk while I cried, not asking questions, just being there, being the daughter I'd raised to be strong and compassionate. Inside her apartment, I told her everything. I watched her face go through the same stages mine had: disbelief, shock, anger, grief. Dad did this, she kept saying. Our dad? I don't understand. He always seemed so devoted to you, so committed to our family. I thought so too, I said. But apparently, we only saw what he wanted us to see. What are you going to do, Mama? She asked, holding my hands. Are you going to divorce him? At 66 years old, after 40 years of marriage, was I really going to start over alone? The thought was terrifying. But the thought of staying with a man who'd betrayed me so thoroughly, so repeatedly, was even more terrifying. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. Right now, I just need to breathe, to think, to figure out who I am outside of being Thomas Richardson's wife. I stayed with Rebecca for a week. Thomas called constantly, my phone, Rebecca's phone, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to desperate to angry. I didn't answer, didn't listen to most of them. I wasn't ready to hear his voice, his excuses, his justifications. Michael came up from Magnolia Springs, bringing Jennifer and the grandchildren. It was the first time in my life that my son looked at me with pity in his eyes, and I hated it. I didn't want to be pitied. I didn't want to be the victim in this story. But that's exactly what I was, wasn't it? The faithful wife who'd been made a fool of. We had to tell Michael the truth. He deserved to know why his mother had suddenly fled to Atlanta, why his father was calling everyone frantically looking for me. Watching my son process his father's betrayal was almost as painful as experiencing it myself. I don't even know who he is anymore, Michael said, his voice thick with anger and disappointment. The man I looked up to my whole life, the man I wanted to be like, He doesn't exist, does he? It was all just an act. I don't know, baby, I told him, using the endearment I hadn't called him in years. I truly don't know what was real and what was pretend anymore. After a week, I knew I had to go back to Magnolia Springs, had to face this situation head-on rather than hiding in my daughter's apartment. I called our pastor, Reverend James Mitchell, and asked if he could be present when I talked to Thomas. I needed a witness, a mediator, someone to keep things from spiraling completely out of control. The conversation happened in Pastor Mitchell's office at the church neutral ground where I felt safe. Thomas looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years in 1 week. "Ellie," he said when I walked in, standing up like he might try to embrace me. I held up my hand to stop him. "Don't. Just sit down." We sat across from each other with Pastor Mitchell between us, and I made Thomas tell the complete truth. All of it. Every detail. The pastor listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, helping me understand the full scope of what had been happening. Thomas admitted he'd been having affairs on and off for the past 15 years. He'd met women through business contacts, at conferences that were actually real, through mutual acquaintances. Some were brief, one-time encounters he claimed meant nothing. Others, like Diane, had lasted months or years. He'd been careful, strategic about hiding it. He had a separate credit card I didn't know about, a separate email account, a locked phone. He'd created an entire system of lies and alibis that had worked perfectly until my spontaneous decision to surprise him in Mobile. "Why?" I finally asked. "That's what I can't understand, Thomas. Why? Was I not enough? Was our marriage not enough? What was missing that you had to go looking for it in the arms of other women?" He struggled to answer, his words coming out halting and inadequate. "It wasn't about you, Ellie. You have to understand that. You were a wonderful wife, a wonderful mother. You never did anything wrong. Then why?" I pressed. "I don't know," he admitted. "Excitement, maybe? Feeling young again? The thrill of something new. Something forbidden? It started almost by accident. A woman at a conference made it clear she was interested, and instead of shutting it down like I should have, I pursued it. And once I'd crossed that line, it became easier to cross it again. And again. Did you ever think about me?" I asked, tears streaming down my face now. "When you were with those women, did it ever cross your mind what it would do to me if I found out? Did you care?" "Of course I cared," he said, crying too. "I hated myself for it, Ellie. Every single time I swore it would be the last, that I'd stop, that I'd be the husband you deserved. But then time would pass and the guilt would fade, and I'd convince myself that what you didn't know couldn't hurt you." Pastor Mitchell spoke then, his voice gentle but firm. "Thomas, you understand that you've broken sacred vows, betrayed profound trust, and caused deep harm not just to Eleanor but to your entire family?" Thomas nodded, unable to speak. "And Eleanor," the pastor continued, turning to me, "you understand that you have every right to be angry, to feel betrayed, to make whatever decision you need to make for your own well-being?" I nodded too. "The path forward from here is entirely up to you both," Pastor Mitchell said. "Thomas, if Eleanor chooses to try to salvage this marriage, you will need to do extensive personal work, counseling, complete transparency, and a long process of rebuilding trust that may never fully return. Eleanor, if you choose to leave this marriage, You are completely justified in that decision, and this church community will support you. There is no wrong choice here except staying in a situation that continues to harm you. I looked at Thomas then, really looked at him. This man I'd known for 44 years, loved for 40 years, built a life with. Could I forgive him? Could I ever trust him again? Did I even want to try? I need time, I said finally. I need space to figure out what I want, who I am, whether I can even imagine a future that includes you. I'll give you whatever you need, Thomas said quickly. Time, space, anything. Just please don't give up on us completely. Please give me a chance to make this right. I didn't answer that. I simply stood up and left. The next few months were the darkest of my life. I moved into the small apartment above my old shop. I still owned the building, though I'd leased the shop space to a younger seamstress. It was tiny, just 1 bedroom and bathroom, but it was mine. A space not contaminated by memories of Thomas and his lies. Our children were devastated, caught between loving both parents and struggling with their father's actions. Rebecca was fiercely protective of me, angry at her father in a way I'd never seen her angry before. Michael was more conflicted, disappointed and hurt, but also wanting to understand, wanting to believe his father could change. The grandchildren were too young to understand why Grandma and Granddaddy weren't living together anymore, why family dinners had stopped, why there was tension at every gathering. That broke my heart perhaps more than anything, that Thomas's choices had robbed them of the stable, loving extended family they deserved. The news spread through Magnolia Springs like wildfire, as it inevitably would in a small town. People whispered, stared, offered sympathy that felt like pity. Some friends rallied around me, bringing casseroles and company, sitting with me during the long, lonely evenings. Others seemed to fade away, uncomfortable with the mess of a broken marriage, unsure how to interact with me now that I was no longer part of a couple. Thomas tried everything to win me back. Flowers arrived daily until I asked him to stop. Love letters filled my mailbox, pages and pages of apologies, explanations, promises. He attended counseling alone since I refused to go with him. He made grand gestures, showing up at the shop, professing his love in front of other people, making me uncomfortable and angry. I tried to figure out what I wanted, who I was outside of being Mrs. Thomas Richardson. For 40 years that had been my primary identity: wife, mother, grandmother, all roles defined by my relationship to other people. Who was Eleanor Mae Carter? Did she even exist anymore? Or had she been completely absorbed into Eleanor Mae Richardson? I started sewing again. Really sewing, not just alterations but creating beautiful, intricate pieces just for the joy of making them. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected over the years. I took long walks, read books I'd been meaning to read for decades, started going to a support group for women dealing with betrayal and divorce. Slowly, painfully, I began to find myself again. And as I did, I realized something crucial. I didn't want to be married to Thomas anymore. Not because I hated him, not even because I couldn't eventually forgive him, but because I didn't want to spend whatever years I had left wondering, worrying, doubting. I didn't want to check his phone, question his whereabouts, live in constant fear of the next betrayal. I deserved better than that. I deserved peace, trust, a life built on truth rather than beautiful lies. In the fall of 2019, 6 months after discovering Thomas's affairs, I filed for divorce. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but also one of the clearest. Our marriage was over. It had actually ended years before when he made the choice to betray his vows, but now we were just making it official. The divorce was finalized in early 2020, right before the whole world changed with the pandemic. We split our assets fairly. He kept the house, I took my shop property and half of our savings. The process was painful, dismantling 40 years of shared life, deciding who got which dishes, which photographs, which memories. What hurt most wasn't losing the material things. It was losing the story I told myself about my life. I thought I had a great marriage, a partnership built on love and trust and mutual respect. Finding out it had been built on lies and secrets and betrayal, that was the deepest wound, one I'm not sure will ever completely heal. The pandemic, oddly enough, helped me in some ways. The world slowed down, people retreated into their homes, and I had space and time to grieve, to heal, to rebuild without constant social pressure and judgment. I spent those months sewing masks for healthcare workers, reconnecting with my children through video calls, learning to be alone without being lonely. Thomas tried to contact me a few times during that first year after the divorce. He'd ended things with Diane, he claimed. He was in therapy, working on himself, understanding why he'd made such terrible choices. He hoped that maybe, eventually, we could try again, build something new on the foundation of honesty. I listened to his messages, read his letters, and felt nothing. Not anger anymore, not love, not even curiosity. Just a profound sense of closure, of a chapter that had ended and needed to stay closed. I appreciate that you're doing that work, Thomas, I told him during one brief phone conversation. I genuinely hope you become a better man, for yourself and for anyone else you might have a relationship with in the future. But that person won't be me. I've moved on, and I need you to respect that and do the same. He accepted it finally, stopped reaching out, and we settled into a distant but civil relationship for the sake of our children and grandchildren. We could be in the same room for family events now without tension, could have polite conversations about the kids, could coexist in the small world of Magnolia Springs without drama. Now here's what I want you to understand. Dear hearts listening to my story, I survived. At 66 years old, after discovering my husband's 15-year pattern of infidelity, after divorcing and starting over, I not only survived, I actually found a kind of peace and contentment I'd never experienced before. Today, at 72, I live in my little cottage that I bought 2 years ago. A charming place with a garden where I grow tomatoes and herbs, with a sewing room filled with natural light, with space for my grandchildren to visit and stay overnight. I've reconnected with old passions. I joined a quilting circle. I volunteer teaching sewing to young girls at the community center. I travel occasionally with friends to quilt shows and fabric conventions. Rebecca is thriving in Atlanta, now head designer at her company, still with Marcus, still creating beautiful things. Michael took over Richardson's hardware when Thomas finally retired last year, renamed it Richardson & Sons Hardware and Supply, and is running it with integrity and honesty, determined to be the kind of man his father pretended to be. My 4 grandchildren, Emma is 12 now, Jacob is 10, bring me immeasurable joy. They spend weekends with me, learning to sew, helping in the garden, listening to my stories. I'm teaching Emma to quilt, passing down the skills that Miss Josephine passed to me, continuing a tradition of creating beauty with our hands and hearts. I even dated a bit, though nothing serious. A widower I met at church, a retired teacher from the quilting circle. It was nice being courted again, feeling attractive and valued. But I've come to realize I'm genuinely content alone. I like my independence, my freedom, my life exactly as it is. As for Thomas, he's still in Magnolia Springs, living in that big house alone. I hear through the children that he's lonely, that he regrets everything, that he understands now what he threw away. Part of me feels sympathy for him. Growing old alone wasn't his plan any more than it was mine. But mostly I just feel neutral. His choices led him to where he is just as my choices led me to where I am. What have I learned from all this pain, dear ones? Let me share the wisdom that came from those dark valleys. First, trust your intuition. Those little warning signs I ignored, the phone secrecy, the changed behavior, the inconsistencies in stories, they were my instincts trying to tell me something was wrong. I dismissed them because I didn't want to seem paranoid or untrusting, but I should have listened. Your gut knows things your heart doesn't want to accept. Second, your identity cannot be entirely built on your relationship to someone else. For 40 years I was primarily Thomas's wife. And when that ended, I almost didn't know who I was. Build your own interests, maintain your own friendships, nurture your own dreams alongside your marriage, not instead of it, but alongside it. That way, if the worst happens, you haven't lost yourself entirely. Third, it's never too late to start over. Never. I was 66 when my marriage ended, an age when many people think their lives are essentially over, just waiting out the remaining years. But these past 6 years since the divorce have been full of growth, discovery, new experiences, genuine happiness. Age is not a barrier to rebuilding, fear is. Fourth, betrayal says everything about the betrayer and nothing about the betrayed. For a long time I blamed myself. Was I not attractive enough? Interesting enough? Attentive enough? But Thomas's affairs were about his character, his choices, his failings. I was a good wife, a faithful partner. His inability to honor that was his failure, not mine. And finally, forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. I've forgiven Thomas truly, not for his sake but for mine, because carrying that anger and bitterness was poisoning my own life. But forgiveness doesn't mean I had to give him another chance, take him back, pretend it never happened. I can forgive him and still choose to protect myself by keeping distance between us. Where are you right now in your life, dear friends? Are you happy? Are you living authentically? Or are you settling for less than you deserve? Think about these questions, really think about them. Life is too short and too precious to spend it in situations that diminish you, with people who don't value you, accepting crumbs when you deserve the whole feast. If you're going through something similar to what I experienced, please know this: you will survive it. The pain that feels unbearable today will gradually, slowly become bearable. The future that seems empty and frightening today will eventually fill with new experiences, new joys, new meanings. You are stronger than you know, more resilient than you imagine, more capable than you believe. And if you're the one who's been unfaithful, who's living a double life, who's betraying someone's trust, please, I beg you, stop. Stop before you cause the kind of devastation Thomas caused. End your marriage honorably if you're unhappy. Be honest about what you want. Give your partner the respect of truth even if the truth is painful. The temporary discomfort of honesty is nothing compared to the permanent damage of betrayal. I want to thank each and every one of you who's listened to this old woman's story today. At 72, I never imagined I'd be sharing something so personal, so painful, with strangers all over the world. But if my experience can help even one person, whether you're going through betrayal, recovering from betrayal, or considering actions that would betray someone, then the vulnerability was worth it. Before I go, tell me one more time, where in this beautiful world are you watching from? What time of day is it where you are? Are you having your morning coffee while listening to me? Your lunch break? Your evening wind down? Drop a comment and let me know. It truly does warm my heart to know who's out there, who's listened to this whole long story with patience and compassion. And remember, dear hearts, you are worthy of love, of honesty, of respect, of partnership that honors you completely. Don't settle for less. Don't accept betrayal as normal or inevitable. Demand the truth. Expect faithfulness. Surround yourself with people who see your value and treat you accordingly. My name is Eleanor Mae Richardson. Well, I've gone back to using Carter now. Actually, Eleanor Mae Carter, seamstress, grandmother, survivor, and yes, still learning every single day how to live fully, authentically, joyfully despite the pain the past held. I love you all. I'm with you in spirit, cheering for you, believing in your strength and resilience. Whatever you're facing today, whatever mountains stand in your path, you can climb them. I know because I've climbed mountains I never thought I could, and so can you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of my healing journey simply by witnessing this story. May you find peace, truth, and genuine love in your own lives, whatever form that takes. God bless each and every one of you wherever you are. This old seamstress is sending love and light your way. Remember, we're all just stitching together the fabric of our lives, one day at a time. And sometimes the most beautiful quilts come from pieces we never expected to use. Take care of yourselves, dear ones. Be kind to yourselves. And never, ever give up on the possibility of joy, even when life has torn everything apart. Because from those torn pieces, you can create something new, something different, something that's entirely, authentically yours. I'm Eleanor Mae Carter, and this has been my story. Thank you for listening with such open hearts.